Hey guys, welcome back to Down and Dirty Modding. Today we're doing something a bit different. Now normally I give you tutorials on stuff that I have experience with or things that I've done, but today we're going to step into uncharted territory. We're going to be working with L200 foam. This is a foam that, as it pertains to us, is commonly used in the cosplay arena, where they use it for making armor, costumes, and weaponry. Because it's light, it's easy to work with, and relatively resilient, I guess. So what we're going to do is use that on our case for the MSI Pro Mod Season 5 build that we're doing called Crevasse. It's gone from a Glacier theme to a May from Overwatch theme. So while I've flipped the chassis on its back and raised it up so I can deal with the cables, I now need to figure out a way to cover that base up. And we're going to be using this foam and sandwiching it on the side and carving May's ice wall into it, so it looks like the case is sitting on a wall of ice. So bear with me, this is the first time I'm really dealing with this foam, so it's kind of a learning process for both of us, which could be fun, it could be horrible, don't really know, but it's definitely going to be interesting. Alright, so I started out with a couple of pieces of foam. One is a piece of 1/2 inch and one's a piece of 1/4. This is L200 in white. I went with white because I'm going to be starting out with a white base coat of paint, and I didn't want to have to cover up a black. So we're going to glue both of these together to get the thickness that I want, but I'm going to cut them into the bands that I need for my case first. I need to measure my height and then my length, and I'm going to make a band that just glues right on there. Now, to cut the L200 out, I'm going to be using either a razor knife or an X-Acto knife. The razor knife's pretty handy, but mine's kind of short, so it's kind of a pain. Also, to do some trimming, I do have a pull saw. I wouldn't suggest a normal carpenter saw or anything that cuts on the push, but since it cuts on the pull and it's got a really long blade, it has been kind of handy a couple of times. So this is just a super sharp pull saw, probably available something like this in a local hardware store. And to put this stuff together, since we are attaching two sheets together, we're going to be using some 3M Super 77 adhesive. This is just a spray-on adhesive that you can get from an automotive parts store. They usually use it for like trim and whatever. There are lots of suggestions online about what cements to use, what contact cements to use to glue this stuff together. This was available to me on short notice and has worked so far, so I'm going to stick with it for now. And I guess now what we got to do is actually measure out what we're doing. By the way, I am going to cut these bands long, and that way I can glue them on and then cut them down to the size that I need, so I don't wind up with gaps that I have to figure out how to fill later. So there will be that. It'll be basically cut a band for two opposite sides, glue them on, clamp it down, let it dry, cut them down to size, and then glue the other two ends on. Clamp it down, let it dry, and then cut it down to size. Then we can get into the fun part of carving and figuring out how to carve ice. So I'm going to go ahead and start measuring and cutting, and you can watch along and see how this is done. All right, now that takes care of a lot of the projects that you might want to do with this foam, as far as cutting it out and adhering it to your case and adhering it to other pieces of foam. So if you're doing like a shield or a badge for your case, you can cut that out with a pattern on that in your foam, and then glue any extra pieces you want onto it, and then slap it onto your case. So if that's part of your plan, you can go ahead and skip forward in the video to where we get this stuff ready for paint and do all the prep work. But for the rest of us, we've still got to go in and add detail. So that requires some carving and some artistic abilities that we'll have to throw at this stuff to get it to look the way that we want to. And since I'm going for ice, I'm definitely going to have to do a little bit more than what's already there. So we're going to do a couple of different things. We're going to carve with our knives, and we're going to use a Dremel if we have to. So with the knife, you can cut beveled edges and channels and all this stuff pretty easily. It slices very, very easily, especially if you've got a sharp razor blade. So you can just cut it out, you can work little details in. And then with the Dremel, you go in and do some of the same stuff. It's not as clean. We've got a sanding drum. And if you're real careful, you can just go in and cut different patterns. So this is pretty handy. It does leave kind of a mess that you have to go back and clean up, but I think all of it kind of does. I'm still learning this, like I said. So those are basically two of the ways you can carve this stuff, and then once you're done carving, we'll go back and figure out how to prep this stuff and get it ready for paint and do some stuff to it that I think will make it last a whole lot longer than what you would expect from this foam. So I've got my pattern starting to lay out. I'm going to finish laying out my pattern, and we're going to do some carving, and then we'll group back up and figure out how to get this stuff ready for paint. Alright, so now we've got it all carved out, and thank God it's ice and it's kind of random. It doesn't have to be perfect because that was kind of a test of my artistic skills. But we've got it all carved out. I actually, even on a side note, used a hand sander, just a air-powered sander, to smooth out the bottom. It's not the most effective way of getting rid of it, but it does work if you can keep it from grabbing. So that's one more tool you can use. Some sort of rotary sander. But now we've got it all carved out. It's rough, and if you're doing this, you'll notice there's little strings and just general rough spots all over it, and dust on top of everything else. So we need a way to get rid of that, and for that we're going to use a heat gun. And what this will do is it'll melt down the little strings that we've got poking out here and there, and then also it'll blow any of the dust off of it that might have come from sanding or doing something like that, so that when we do paint it, it's relatively clean. So now I'm just going by what I've recently learned, so this might be a little bit iffy, but from what I'm told, you basically just run that heat gun over it till it gets kind of glossy. Now I've tried it on a few pieces, and it melts the smaller spots, and then kind of does get a little bit of a glossy haze to it. So now we're just going to take the heat gun and run it around and try to get this all cleaned up as well as we can. All right, so you can see, well, maybe you can't, I'll try to get some better shots, but that did clean up a lot of the little strings and stuff. Basically just kind of melted that top layer and kind of smoothed it all out. And it really helped me out because it made it look a lot better than it was when I got done carving. So, but it just kind of melts that little top layer down. I still have a little bit of touch up here to do. Some of my top edges where my 2 pieces of foam meet, I need to kind of sand down a little bit, but that basically gets us ready for paint. And well, it gets us ready to get ready for paint, let's say that. What I'm going to do is take the base off of the case so I can clean up the top a little bit, and then we'll go into how to get this ready to paint. Alright, so we've got it off the case, we've cleaned up the top a little bit more, went ahead and hit that with the heat gun to smooth it out. Now we need to get this ready for paint, and to do that we're going to put 3 to 5 coats of Plastidip on here. It's going to add some durability to the foam and also give us a good base to start painting from. Just a little interruption on that. I want to go a little bit more in depth on the Plastidip. Now we use it for a few different reasons. Number one, this foam has a cellular composition, so when you cut it, you're actually opening up little tiny air bubbles. So that Plastidip gets in there and fills those in and smooths them out. So that's one reason. The second is it provides a more durable outer finish than the foam has itself. So you're kind of coating it with a rubbery plastic layer that's going to withstand some more abuse than just the foam would. And the third reason is that some paints are corrosive to foams. And what I've done is taken some spray paint and sprayed the backside of a piece of scrap. So I wanted to check to see if the paints I was going to use were going to be aggressive on this foam. Turns out they're not. But if they were, that Plastidip gives me a barrier between the foam and that paint, so that paint can't go in and turn our foam to goo. So that's all I wanted to add about that, and now back to our regular programming. Now another thing to think about when you're making all this is, basically to not do what I've done. And when I made my base, I left a big gap in here so I could use some scrap wood up. But on second thought, I probably should have made something for the edges. So at some point I'm going to go back, glue me some pieces in here that's going to give some more structural support to the edges of this foam, because I don't want them moving and popping the paint off when I'm done. So that'll be after the fact. But right now we're going to put some Plastidip on here, get a good coat on it, and then we'll be back and kind of discuss what we've gone over today. Alright, so we finished up with our Plastidip, and you can see we've got a nice, well, I mean, you can kind of see. We've got a nice durable shell on the outside, and it's filled up to all the little holes and crevices and stuff in this foam, so that now it's ready for paint. We can go over this with a primer or our first coat of paint, and we should be set. Myself, I've actually got a few spots to go back and touch up with some filler, just because of the way it laid out and the way I built all of this on this framing. I've got some joints that didn't quite seal up, so I've got to do some filling. But then it's ready to go and get painted and be ready to stick on the case. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to use L200 foam. Basically cutting it out with a razor knife, gluing it together with adhesives, carving it with knives and Dremels, and then using Plastidip to seal it all up so it's ready for paint. And then you've got a pretty cool little deal. It's a neat material to work with. I'd love to see it used more in cases. I've seen it a few spots here and there, but it's really caught on in the cosplay world, not so much in the modding world yet. So let me go ahead and slap this thing on here so we can kind of get an idea of what the finished product might look like. I think it's going to look pretty cool. I guess that's all I've got, guys. Make sure you go out and check out MSI's Pro Mod Season 5. I'm a judge. Let me judge you. No, just kidding. But if you've got a project that will fit the conditions of the contest, by all means, jump in and join in. There's some pretty cool prizes in it. Like I say, I'm a judge. There's 3 more judges who are doing demo builds, so check them out. And you can also check out my Facebook page at Insolent Gnome on Facebook, and then at Insolent_Gnome on Twitter. So I will talk to you all later, and get out and mod something.